Carol, did you see this description of the different kinds of book people on Instagram? Something along the lines of some people are bookworms who read like their lives depend on it. Others are book bees who buzz between multiple unfinished books. Many are book bears who read the majority of books in the winter months. And then others are book dragons who hoard books like their treasure.
I did see that. And what do you think you are, Dee?
I think I'm a book bee. I always am reading about 6 books at one time. What are you?
I think I'm a cross between a book bee. I always have multiple books going and a book dragon, because if you see my coffee table and the books, I'm like, how many books did I buy in July? But I thought of another one.
Oh, you have another one? I'm a book dragon too. I mean, there's no way
Yeah,
I have bookshelves everywhere. Okay, so what else did you think of?
a book cat.
A book cat. What does that mean?
They like to curl up in any warm, sunny
Oh,
location and read books.
I like it. I like it. I like yours the best. So that all sounds good, but let's get started on this episode so that people know we are a gardening podcast and not really a book podcast.
That is a good idea. Here we go. Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about 1/3 of an acre.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden 1.5 acres out of 7.5 acres in the country.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening. We want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Carol, how was gardening this week?
Well, thanks for asking, Dee. I would say it was a fairly normal week in the garden. I harvested a ton of green beans, some peppers, squash, a few tomatoes, hardly any cucumbers. So I did write a post about lazy cucumbers, and I posted on Instagram one of my big hauls with all the green beans. I watered the garden on Monday because we hadn't had rain for a while. And of course, then we got 1/4 of an inch on Wednesday evening. So I no doubt caused it to rain by watering.
Of course you did.
Of course I did. My sister stopped by last Sunday because her daughter-in-law gifted her some cuttings of a philodendron, which was very unusual with dark leaves, and a regular old pothos. And she had bought some pots for them, and I potted them up because, at Carol's place, it's not a big deal to, just grab the bag of potting soil and let's pot this up. Where if you're not a big-time gardener, it's a bigger ordeal. So I had those potted up in just a few minutes, and she gave me one of them, and so I was pretty excited to get that dark leaf philodendron. And
I'm kind of excited. I wonder what one it is.
Well, I looked it up, and I think I know what it is, but I'm not quite sure. I think it's, never mind. I can't even remember. I'll try to put it in the show notes. Also, I noticed last night the hardy begonia and the blackberry lilies are starting to bloom, which is kind of a sign of the end of summer.
Yeah.
The end days, although we are far from the end of summer. We have some weeks to go. So I'm not going to think about that. I'm going to ask you what's going on in your garden this past week.
The blackberry lilies, by the way, are about done in my garden. I saw one little bloom left and I was like, oh, that means, yeah. Okay, so.
About done?
Yeah, my blackberry lilies are almost finished.
Oh, I guess that makes sense.
They have pods. Let's see. On Wednesday, I worked all day in the garden and I felt really strong, which made me happy.
Yay!
Yeah, we've had great weather that's unfortunately coming to an end on Sunday, but that's okay. We're recording this on Saturday and it's a beautiful day today. So I will be out there today, but I'm not going to kill myself. And let's see, on Wednesday, I weeded. I cut things back. I made things tidy, cut back the roses to get them to bloom again. You can still cut back roses here as late as August. And right now you can feed them again, but you don't want to go too much past that because cold weather.
That's
and they
right.
have to harden off. So I also harvested green beans, which is about all that's producing in my vegetable garden right now. And I have good news on the zinnia front.
Yay!
So I finally gave up sowing seeds in the cut flower gardens because of either the cutworms or that beetle that was eating them. And I sowed 2 kinds in the potager. And so by doing that, I've been thinning them as they come up and get bigger
Uh-huh.
after I pinched them off at 2 inches. And then I go move those into the cut flower garden. And after they're a certain height, the cutworms don't want them anymore because they get those kind of coarse leaves and they're not interested.
Right.
And then let's see, I've been moving those. So I'll have some in the potager, some in the cut flower beds, and it's working. And then I put wire cloches on top of some seedlings and they're thriving. I love those cloches. They were not cheap. I bought them on Amazon. We'll put the link in the newsletter. But you know what? They're just really great. And I'll be using them forever. And they're black, so they don't show up in pictures too much either. So for people who care about that. So that's what's going on in my garden.
Well, that reminded me that my seedlings in the sunroom, everybody came up, at
Yeah.
least a few seedlings from every variety, except for the Italian alkanet, which I'm not sure I want to plant that anyway. So I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm going to try to put those seedlings outside, but I got to put them kind of in the shade, and I got to remember to water because I don't want them to dry
Yeah.
out. But
Yeah.
they need more light than they're going to get in the sunroom, and I don't want to turn on the plant lights right now. I don't know. I'm just lazy.
Yeah. And I mean, you're out there watering anyway. So, your
We'll s-
pots.
yeah, we'll
You'll have
see.
to
We'll
decide
see.
what you want to do. So let's play favorites. You go first.
My favorite, I think it's the surprise lilies. They are blooming all over. I have them up and down this one path. They're on the side in the pink garden, and they didn't all come up at once, which I'm kind of happy about. And when my
Yeah.
sister came over with the houseplant cuttings, we looked at the back garden, and she normally sees it in at Easter when it's, still a lot of stuff coming up. And she went back
Hmm.
there Sunday and she's like, wow, where'd all this stuff come from? I says, it's there. You just don't see it at Easter time. But she thought the surprise lilies were really pretty. And I think she could probably put one in her condo, just stuck it somewhere. But anyway, the surprise lilies, like
I think the
Horace.
surprise lilies are beautiful and I love them. And mine are blooming right now too. And they're all over the place. And I want to say that they smell good. I always forget that they have scent. Have you thought about that when you go back there?
I haven't noticed that they have scent, but then, I've got those big tall lilies that knock your socks off with scent. So if I got closer, I might smell them.
So my tall lilies bloom first, and then
Yep.
my surprise lilies,
Same
which
here.
is different. So yeah, they definitely have some scent, and that's really nice. Oh, there's a little bird on my gate out there, a little sparrow, little baby. It's that time of year where all the little babies now have their feathers and
Right.
they're bouncing around, being as only little babies can do. In my garden, it's probably a tie right now between Henry Eiler's sweet coneflower and Coreopsis tripteris, which is tall Coreopsis. And the reason is, so there are two beds that face the street, and in the middle of summer, these two plants, there's a grass row in between the two beds, and these two plants grow up in between, on either
Cool.
side. So you
Right.
walk between them, and there's just a plethora of insects buzzing around, and it's just very exciting. And they're big, tall, and yellow. And I think they have a place in anyone's garden. I really do. So they're at their peak. And so everybody look for a video this next week. Yes, I'm going to start doing videos again. I just needed a break. I mean, I was just tired. So I got a break and I'm ready to talk about some more things again. And I'll talk about those.
All right. Well, my Henry Eiler's sweet coneflower, I do not believe it is blooming quite yet, but it's
Probably
gotten
not.
in, it's gotten into a little bit of shade, so it's not probably the healthiest.
Yeah, it likes really full hot sun and not a lot of water. So it's a good native selection.
All right, let's do the question of the week.
So you had the questions.
I had two green bean questions this week. So I went to lunch with former work colleagues yesterday, and one of them said, hey, something kept eating off my green beans. And I've seen her garden. She has these big fancy cages that her partner built, and those things are you couldn't get in there if you didn't lift the lid off. So I didn't. I said, "Do you think a rabbit could have got in there?" And she said, "No, there's no way that a rabbit could get in. And if it got in, it probably wouldn't be able to get out." But I said, "So
Right.
is the plant just laying there and the leaves are there still and it's just on the ground and, like a cutworm situation? And she said no, but she said she went through 2 sowings and then she switched the variety. And on the 3rd sowing, she got green beans to stay. And I said, well, I don't know what caused the other problem, but I'm going to say that it wasn't necessarily the variety of green beans, but just later in the year, whatever was messing with it isn't messing with it anymore.
Yeah, it's timing. I'm almost sure it's timing because that happens all the time. Like, remember my first sowing of green beans this year had spider mites and they had them so bad and they finally grew out of it because they're a very stalwart green bean and they're finally going to bear, but it was kind of miserable. So then I waited a few weeks and I planted in another spot. And so by that time, the spider mites had moved on because the weather had changed.
Yes. So I'm still curious what exactly ate down her green beans. And I still kind of suspect that maybe there was a way that rabbits were getting in there because, they can get in some pretty small holes. But the trick is,
it could be caterpillars too. I don't know.
I don't know. Anyway, the other question was from our good friend Basil Becky, who lives down in Brown County, Indiana. And
Yes.
I had posted that big harvest on Instagram and she says, I don't seem to be able to grow green beans. And I know they're the simplest things to grow. Any advice? And the only thing I could think to say was find an old time gardener and ask them what variety they're growing and grow that variety.
That's a good place to start. And I was thinking about, remember that summer when we went all fancy and we tried a whole bunch of new green beans and we had the worst year ever?
What fools we were.
Yeah, that was a bad year for green beans. I'd also say make sure your soil doesn't have too much nitrogen in it because green beans don't need it. They're nitrogen fixers anyway, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, with vegetables, if you have too much nitrogen in the soil, and I'd say this is true of almost any vegetable, it attracts pests and they don't fruit. And you want things to fruit, whether it's a tomato, a squash, although squash are heavy feeders. You want a balanced fertilizer. So,
yes.
Back in the old days, people just sprinkled around. Old days, my grandmother's time, which is the 50s and 60s, they sprinkled around just a good broad spectrum
12, 12, 12.
White one, 12, 12, 12. Now people do more of a natural one. And I did find a fertilizer and I sent you a picture of it. And it's actually made from plant waste.
And it was made from food waste. I thought this is interesting.
Waste. It was kind of interesting. And I'll look it up real quick to see. It's called Arbor, Arber. So it's a little different. It may have mold in it, so I may not be able to use it, but hey, it's worth a try. You can use any kind of, that's what compost helps with. Just make sure it's a good balanced fertilizer, whatever you decide to use.
That's right. All right. So I'm going to do a quote and we'll talk about our flower topic.
Okay. Sounds fun.
Be always grateful for every moment of your life you get to enjoy with people you love and those who love you. Life is extremely precious and short. Sanjita Rana.
I love that quote. I think it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. I think you found it.
I think that we need to remember to, especially during this time when I'm getting so many messages from people who are distressed for one reason or another, right?
Yep.
And I think the best way to calm that distress is not to spend too much time online.
Yep.
Don't spend too much time online, especially on social media. And go spend time with people you love. Invite them over for dinner. Have watermelon in your backyard. Do things like that. So, because real people make us remember that people are good.
That's true. So our flower topic is we're going to start a Fall is for Planting series, and it's a series about some of the things to be thinking about as we move into fall. Not that we want to rush the season, but I don't know about you, Dee, but I'm getting emails that says, hey, order your spring bulbs now.
And they're often on sale. So it's an extra good time to do it, right?
It is.
Spring flowering bulbs, it's time now to order them. And by ordering them now, you don't miss the opportunity to get exactly what you want.
Right.
That's the first thing. And I order my bulbs, you order your bulbs. We don't usually buy them in the box store. And there's a reason for that. What's the reason, Carol?
Well, the good bulb vendors will send you that bulb closer to the time that you should be planting it. And if it's in the big box store, I mean, they'll show up almost by Labor Day. And then it's like that bulb is probably A, it's not a top size bulb. And B,
Right.
you've got to find a place to store it for like 2 months in my case. If you buy it around Labor Day, you're not planting until Halloween.
Right. And I won't plant until end of November or beginning of December. So I wait until I actually plant around Thanksgiving. That's my cue of when to plant. And that way everything has time to grow. So you want top size bulbs because the bigger the bulb, the better the flower, the bigger the flower. That's true
Yes.
of any bulb, whether it's an amaryllis. And I would also suggest you might want to pick up an amaryllis at the box store or at your local nursery. That's fine. But try ordering a few of them because amaryllis are beautiful and they'll ship them right at the time to plant them at Christmas. Well, to get them to bloom for Christmas. And they're just a pleasure. And the same thing with fall planted bulbs, which I've done, I can't tell you how many posts, videos on fall planted bulbs. You can just go to the blog and search it. And I know you have too.
Yes. So let's give people some pointers on what to think about when you're buying bulbs. And the first thing is, when do you want this thing to bloom? And so some tulips, for example, there's like early blooming tulips, mid-season tulips, late blooming tulips. Same with daffodils. Some bloom earlier, some bloom
Daffodils.
later. So think about like when you want things to bloom. And if you're like, I want things to bloom all spring, then make sure you're selecting some earlies, some mid-season, some late, so that you will have bloom all spring.
And in my case, I used to try to time it for Easter. And
Yep.
Easter is a movable feast. It's actually based on all kinds of things. So, by being a movable feast, you need to figure out when Easter is and then try to plan your bulbs, knowing, of course, that it's variable because the weather is variable. But we tried to do this up at church, and it was really amusing this spring to try to capture when those tulips were going to bloom and were we going to make it happen. And we did actually. They bloomed for Holy Week, which was it was funny because the young woman who is in charge of the facility, who watches over the whole facility, including the landscape, and our landscape designer, they had a bet going, and then I was supposed to try to predict. And I was like, guys, predicting bulbs is hard. So, one thing to keep in mind, any late blooming tulip also has a very long growing stem. And so that's one of the reasons it blooms later. And these they're really a good bloom for warmer climates. And then the double flowering tulips are late bloomers too. Early bloomers tend to not do too well in Oklahoma. I do mids and lates.
So do you know when Easter is next year?
I've not looked it up, but I saw you doing it right now.
I did look it up. So Easter this year was March the 31st.
It was early.
It was very early. So will those same flowers be blooming again next year for Easter? No. Easter is as
No.
late as it ever is. It's April the 20th.
Right, which is how it does. We have the early Easter and then we have the late Easter. And we dig up all our tulip bulbs at church anyway. And so, in fact, we were just placing our order this week. They texted me and were like, what tulips do you want to see? And then we'll see if they listen to me. I don't know if they did or not.
So the next thing you want to think about is, where do you want to plant these? And so I'll give my younger sisters an example. They are using their garage as like an exercise room. So they park on the driveway. And I said, don't plant your bulbs in the backyard. Plant them right here in this bed, by the sidewalk, by the driveway. You will see them as you come and go to work and everything. And she's like, none in back? And I says, none in back. Right all here. And so that is what she did. And the other thing to think about is all that foliage that dies back. People get bothered by that. It doesn't bother me.
Doesn't bother me either. I mean, I've got a lot of daffodils, so sometimes it's a little irritating, but I just plant daylilies next to them or hostas, and that helps cover up the foliage. So,
yeah. I got some daffodils blooming in this one bed that has a bunch of daylilies that come up, and the daffodil foliage literally just disappears as the daylilies come up.
Right, and you can just leave it there, or you can pull it off when it's dead. Don't pull off your foliage for your bulbs while it is still green, because that's what's feeding the bulb for the next year. And that's especially true for anything that's perennial. So, 3, what if you have voles and squirrels? And then there's moles that just tunnel and shift everything around. So, a rule of thumb is voles eat vegetation and moles eat meat. So, M for moles, V for voles.
Right.
And you can cage your bulbs. First of all, let's just say this: nothing eats daffodils, nothing, because they don't like them. It's icky. Deer don't eat them. Voles don't eat them. Squirrels don't eat them. Now, moles will shift them around sometimes, but it's not that big a deal. So, tulips, on the other hand, are the chickens of the plant world. Everybody loves chicken and everybody loves tulips. So, what would you do, Carol, if you were a true tulip lover?
So if I was a true tulip lover, first of all, caging is a lot of work. You have to build like a cage out of chicken wire. What I have done is 2 things. One, I don't leave around the little papery stuff on the tulips that might come off, or some in the bottom of the bag. And don't leave that on the ground, because that is a sure sign to the squirrels that tulips are planted here and they'll start digging. I also cover over the area with like leaf mold and stuff so it doesn't look freshly dug, because that also, for some reason, squirrels know to dig where it's been dug before.
Yeah.
And then now I have done this once or twice, and I know up at the art museum where they plant hundreds of thousands of bulbs, they use a product called Plant Skid, and they actually put it on the bulbs when they plant them, and that keeps critters from digging for them. And then you could just
because it has
spray that
blood.
around. Yeah.
It's got dried blood and it stinks. And you can also take your bulbs and put them in it. Like, you can turn it into a slurry, pour it over your bulbs and mix it in with them and plant them. This is a very unpleasant job. This is a job I could not do anymore because of alpha-gal syndrome, but it does work. And I did it in the past. You can also, Plant Skid works very well, but not if you have a hound dog. Because when I had a hound dog, he liked to dig them up because of the blood smell.
Yeah, he thought he was going to get himself a carcass under there.
Nice. Yeah. But it also makes the deer not want to be near them either. So I have another idea.
What's that?
This is from my friend Teresa Dawkins, who lives up by Tulsa. She does cages because she is a true tulip aficionado. So she does these cages, but what she uses is the small trash cans from the dollar stores. So they're already made for her and they're not very big. And she's got I'll see if I can find her Instagram video where she talked about how she did it. And it was faster than doing the other cages because you've already got it made for you. And I think she can plant 8 bulbs in a cage, and she digs the hole, sets the cage down, puts the bulbs in, and then puts the dirt on top. And then she covers it with either leaf mold or some kind of mulch. So I thought her bulb show was fantastic. Am I willing to go that much trouble? No. I only plant bulbs in one place. Tulips, I should say. Daffodils are everywhere, but tulips are in like 2 places in my yard, and they are in places where I don't have voles. So, and then when the voles show up there, I'm moving them to another spot.
The other thing is, like with my crocuses, I've planted so many that even if the voles or the squirrels or whoever digs up a few, I'm still going to have plenty.
Yeah, your crocus lawn is gorgeous. And just for Oklahomans, if you have a sunny lawn, don't plant crocus in it because you'll have brown grass with crocus. You can do it with shade grass. All right. Number 5, is now a good time to move your spring flower bulbs, Carol?
Well, generally, I would say no, because it is hard to know where to dig and find them. And so I would say if you were going to share your bulbs or you wanted to move them, it really is easier for people like us to move in what they call in the green in the spring. So after they finish flowering, dig them up and move them. And in fact, some people very successfully get the bulbs, like the art museum digs up all the bulbs. You dig up all the bulbs at church after flowering. Some people will take those and plant them, and they will have some success the following year getting them to come back and flower.
Yeah, they'll just be small. They'll be smaller tulips, or they may not come up at all. Some of them perennialize better than others. We compost ours, but that's because we treat them like annuals, and then they put in our beautiful annual show. So there are some exceptions to these, and these are things you grow, not me.
So we talked about how I plant bulbs starting in late October, like Halloween, and you start
Yeah.
in November. But I also plant colchicums and autumn crocuses. And so those will bloom the same year you plant them in the fall. And so if you order them now, they'll send them to you much earlier. Get them in the ground right away. They don't like to be out of the ground. And like I said, they can bloom the same year.
Yeah.
And then if you
And
buy
snowdrops.
snowdrops, which you don't buy any snowdrops, they don't. Snowdrops is
It's
another
too
one.
hot here. It's too hot
Yeah.
here. You're better off to grow leucojum, which is summer snowflake. It's just
Yeah.
easier.
So the snowdrops here, as if you order them, you will likely get those earlier and just get them in the ground right away, and they'll be fine.
I also don't grow colchicums and I don't grow autumn crocuses. These grow extremely well in cooler climates. They do not love it here. So, and here's the thing, it's hard enough to grow here. I don't think you need to make it harder. There was something else I thought of. Oh, well, it went away.
Well,
So there you go.
one fall blooming crocus that may do okay is the saffron crocus. Doesn't do okay.
I don't know. Never grown it. Not going to. Crocuses are beloved by voles, and I have a vole problem anyway. So, but other people
Okay.
can try. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to disappoint you. Just not interested.
Whatever. I have saffron crocus that comes up. It's come up for like the past 3 years. And the
I
autumn
know.
crocuses, I've been planting more of those. And I might, after this show recording, go order some more because I have so many crocuses in front in the spring that people know there's crocuses in front. And when I plant autumn crocus, then I want them to go by and like think, wow, look at her magical gardening powers.
Yeah, I
Crocuses in
know.
the fall.
You wrote a blog post about that last year. So I just want to point out Carol lives in Indiana. It's a whole different state. All right. So you said we should consider reading Growing Bulbs in the Natural Garden Innovative Techniques for Combining Bulbs in Every Season by Jacqueline Vanderkloot. And we actually profiled this book earlier
Yes.
this year.
Yes.
I love anything by Jacqueline. She's a wonderful, wonderful writer, really nice person. She wrote an earlier book called Color Your Garden, Exciting Mixtures of Bulbs and Perennials, which came out in 2018. It's a little hard to find right now, but your library might have it, or maybe you can find it on bookfinder.org. And she just has really good advice. She became very famous in the US when Martha Stewart profiled her and started planting her bulbs in a more natural fashion. And then she's also done a lot of work with Pete. I can't get Pete's last name. Thank you, Pete Uldoff. Yeah, she had a lot of work with him and she's done a lot of his gardens. So, very famous woman who is a really nice person, too.
Yes. And the most practical advice she gave is empty out all your bulbs that you're going to plant into like a wheelbarrow or a bucket or something, mix them all up, and then toss them out into the flower bed where you're going to plant them and plant them where they land. And my sister did that upon my suggestion and she thought it was kind of nutty, but it was beautiful. And she still talks about how beautiful it is in the spring. The bulbs just kind of come up and they don't look like little soldiers walking down the sidewalk. I said, you don't want little soldiers.
Yeah, which is nice. It's very nice.
So that's it. So, that's the flower topic.
That was quite extensive.
Buy your bulbs. I'm going to order some this weekend.
I already ordered some tulips, but I'm sure there's something else I need to order, but maybe not today. All right, so here's my quote for the next part. Growing older only means the spirit grows serene, and we behold things with our souls that our eyes have never seen. And that's by Helen Steiner Rice. And she was a Christian author who was very, very popular in the 1970s. I used to read her books. Beautiful books. Vegetable.
Amaranth and celosia for the vegetable.
Which people don't think of amaranth as a vegetable, but it is. And celosia is a type of amaranth, which is kind of throws people too. So you said your contribution is?
Well, of course, last year I wrote an article for Family Handyman about growing celosia, and I am growing 2 All-America Selection celosias from seed, Flamma Orange and Burning Embers. Burning Embers has the red foliage that is typical of many amaranth varieties.
Many
Flamma Orange, I also grew last year. It's bright orange flowers. What amazed me last year and why I think that it's going to be like a permanent addition to my container garden back there is as the seeds form, birds will come in and eat those seeds off the celosia.
Hmm. They do the
So
same
that's
thing
fun.
with regular amaranth too. So that's a good reason to grow it. And a lot of celosias are red. A few of them are other colors. I also am growing Flamma orange. I tried to grow burning embers and something ate it, which is, amaranth is edible. It's edible from the green size all the way up to the seed size. So it's a plant
Yep.
that was a very important source of food for Native Americans way, way, way back. And we use it a lot in gluten free cooking because it makes a good flour, but it also makes a good nutty thing to put inside your breads and stuff to get more texture. But I like it as a flower and it can tower over your garden and get huge. And I wrote an Instagram video, I did an Instagram video last summer, which I found. It was like really last fall. And it was of hot biscuits, which is a variety I grew last year. And
Uh-huh.
I've got the link in here, Carol, believe it or not, for both the video and where you can find hot biscuit seed. That never
Wow,
happens,
Dee,
Carol.
that is amazing. Now I have a question for you.
Yes.
Some amaranth, and I think the elephant amaranth
Yes.
will self-sow. And so once you plant it, if you don't get rid of the seed heads, you'll have that amaranth coming up every year. Do you find that in your garden?
I would say that happens with all amaranth and a lot of the celosia too. I mean, if you don't get it out of there and it dries, you'll have lots of babies. And I do. I have lots of babies of a celosia I grew last year called China Garden. And
Uh-huh.
here's the kicker. All the stuff that I planted this year that I worked so hard to get going, that was eaten by everything, it was eaten by everything. All of the celosia that has come up on its own is doing just fine and nothing ate it. There is no reason
Yeah.
for this, but
That
awesome.
garden putting you in your place. That garden is putting you in your place.
I would say the animals and the bugs are for sure. So they are let's say a few things about how to grow amaranth or celosia. They like hot weather, hot, hot weather. You can direct sow the seeds in the middle of summer and you will still get a good, at least here. You might have to grow them a little earlier in Carol's world. So, but don't plant them too early because they hate cold weather and that'll just invite bugs to eat them. And they're pretty fast. And if something else fails in the garden, stick some amaranth in there or some celosia because it'll do just fine. And I'm actually growing some in my Vigo garden beds in a spot that wasn't, I don't think I planted anything in it. And I had a packet of amaranth. And so I sprinkled the seeds and they came up like gangbusters and they're getting huge now. And I've got a lot of celosia that's self-seeded. And then I put the Flamma orange in and it has suffered this year. I have no idea why. It's
Well, my
growing.
Flamma orange and the burning embers both, I think, were attacked by like ants, and it caused the leaves to kind of curl. And the
Yeah.
Flamma orange have grown out of it. I'm waiting for the
Burning
burning
embers.
embers. It's the leaves are still kind of curled. It hasn't quite grown out of it, but I think that it will. So there's that. But that,
I feel
Flamma
like mine
orange.
had aphids this year. I don't know. It
Yeah,
was it was
maybe.
a very weird spring. It was very long and very wet and some things just didn't love it. So you can sow the seed or you can plant the plants, but you want to do it 12 to 15 inches apart because amaranth can grow like quite large. Celosia is
That's
smaller sometimes, depending on the type you grow. And if you're going to grow amaranth, it's quite top heavy. So plan to support them somehow. And also pinch the plants when they're about 2 inches tall to help them spread out and not grow quite as large. In my video, it's funny because I have a plant that fell over and I lift it up in the video, which is kind of amusing. So now
that's true. Now,
there
do you
was
harvest the grain?
I've never harvested the grain because no, I'm not good about that stuff. You know me. I
I
just
know
grow it.
you. Yeah.
I'm not growing it
So,
as a vegetable, but you can. But if you wait too long to harvest the flowers, the grain will all fall out anyway. So it's not hard
right,
to grow it to grain size.
right. And then to wrap up amaranth, I would like to point out that you can grow them as microgreens.
You sure can. And they're a good plant as microgreens, and lots of people eat them that way. Highly nutritious plant, Good for you. Good for the birds. Fa la 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 la. How about that next quote?
I guess we're done with celosia and amaranth.
I'm done.
I love people that read. I think it screams humility. When someone reads, they are essentially admitting they want more, that the world is not enough for them. They want more knowledge, more experience. Whatever this life is, they want more of it. And that is by Nicholas Brown.
Go, Nicholas. And that might be another way to get away from all the stress of the world. Go read.
That's true.
Because if you read books, I don't know, it gives you peace and contentment. And that's a nice thing. It was cute last night because Megan came over with Maddie and so did Robert. And Megan looked at me and she goes, hey, I've got a book for you to read. And she goes, it's Last of the Moon Girls. And I said, I've read it. And she goes, no way. Because we don't tend to read the same type of thing. And I said, yeah, I think I read it 2 summers ago and I enjoyed it. And she goes, it's very enjoyable. And I said, it is. And so that's Megan's suggestion. But that's not the book that's on our bookshelf.
On our bookshelf, Women in My Rose Garden, The History, Romance, and Adventure of Old Roses, the hardcover by Anne Chapman, author, Paul Starosta, photographer. And so Dee is holding up the hardcover of the book. I don't know why you put hardcover in the title name.
I think I took it from Amazon and that's why it's in there. I think there is only a hardcover. So I heard about this book on Teresa Byington's Rose Chat podcast, and heritage roses are often named after women because when rose growers, rose hybridizers were trying to get more roses into the marketplace, one of the easiest ways to do that was to name them after someone's favorite friend, relative, lover, saint, all the things, right? So there are some really wonderful names. So this is from the book. This is from the book's blurb content. So we may be familiar with Mary Queen of Scots, Amy Robsart, and Joan d'Arc, but who are Adelaide d'Orléans, Nancy Steen, and Noor Mahal? Among the more than 30 women described here are serene queens, duchesses, aristocrats, courageous heroines, and pioneers, as well as the passionate gardeners who contributed much to the cultivation and preservation of the roses named for each one. So there's a portrait of the woman in each piece, and then they show you a picture of the rose after they tell you about the woman. This is a delightful book, and it's a book not to be read quickly, but a great present for any rose lover in your life. It would make a good birthday present. It's very thoughtful. Order it ahead early, whoever you order it for, because it took me a month to get this book.
Interesting.
And I don't know why.
Is Peggy Martin in there?
I don't know. Let me look and see. I think
she has a whole book written about her rose.
Yeah, it's famous. No, these are all older roses. So Empress Josephine, Anais Seglas, Gertrude Jekyll, Marie Henriette Duchess, it would be Duchesse or Duchessa de Bourbon, Lady Alice Hillingdon, stuff like that. So I don't know how they picked the women to profile, but it's really it's a beautiful book. It sits by my bedside. And it's what I read before I go to sleep.
This one's by your bedside. That sounds really nice. And so let me say the title again since I butchered it before. Women in My Rose Garden, The History, Romance, and Adventure of Old Roses by Anne Chapman, and Paul Starosta was the photographer. We'll put an Amazon link because we could not find that on bookshop.org.
We could not. So it's a good book. It deserves to be read more. Ready for the next quote?
I'm going to buckle in. It's a long one.
It's a long one, and it's going to take a minute. Everyone must leave something behind when he dies, my grandfather said. A child or a book or a painting or a house or a wall built or a pair of shoes made or a garden planted. Something your hand touched, some way so your soul has somewhere to go when you die. And when people look at that tree or that flower you planted, you're there. It doesn't matter what you do, he said, so long as you change something from the way it was before you touched it into something that's like you after you. Take your hands away. The difference between the man who just cuts lawns and a real gardener is in the touching, he said. The lawn cutter might just as well not have been there at all. The gardener will be there a lifetime. And that was by one of my very favorite authors, Ray Bradbury, and it comes from Fahrenheit 451.
That is very, very thought-provoking.
As his stuff often is. The cat just almost
very
knocked off stuff. So our dirt this week, I found quite by accident when I was at one of my favorite stores in town. It's called Sprouts. And they are carrying this summer a series of hybrid fruits. And this was the very cherry plum. And I don't usually fall for this stuff, but there was just something about them in that bag. And I brought them home, and those things are fabulous. Fabulous. They're so good.
I went and looked it up. And so the company, which is the Fruitful Fruit Tree Company,
yes,
I think it's called.
Yes.
They said in 2011, they introduced the latest stone fruit hybrid, a cross between a plum and a cherry.
A bunch of cherries and a bunch of plums, but yes.
Yeah, this wasn't just like they crossed this one and that one. They worked on this for many, many years. There was a private breeder, someone called Zagers of Modesto, who spent probably
20, 30 years.
Decades.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it looks very good. And I looked at pictures of it and I realized that it's probably, I don't think any of my grocery stores around here are quite fancy enough to have it, but I am going to be on the lookout for it because it sounds delicious. Very
it is delicious.
Plums.
It's like so it's an interspecific hybrid. And for those people who, don't study this stuff, there's the genus and then there's the species. And interspecific means that something is in the same genus, which is the cherry plum genus, and then they take the two different species and put them together, which is really hard to do because species don't like to intermix. But they figured out how to do it through, I suspect, gene splicing, but I don't care because this is and this is not GMO. This is different.
No.
It is a hybrid. And so they've done it with several fruits. And since this week, we bought these berry cherry plums, and berry has two R's in it, like a cherry. And we bought these and we brought them home and we ate them so fast, you cannot imagine. Because here's the thing. They taste a lot like a cherry, but they have the texture of a plum. So they have substance. I don't know how to describe it. Just delicious. Since then, I've also tried the apriums, which is a mixture of apricots and plums. They are also delicious. They are so good. Well, for example, the very cherry plum, I had 4 or 5 left, and I brought them out for Megan and Maddie to try. Maddie ate them all. Her mom got one, and then Maddie ate the rest of them. Maddie's a picky little eater. And then Megan, I said, well, try the apriums. And the apriums are beautiful, too. They're a dark, dark purple. And then the skin is slightly like an apricot. But the cool thing is, how apricots are extremely tender when they ship them, and they often spoil. This won't spoil because it's a little tougher. I can't describe how good that is. And then I tried the peacherine, which is a mixture between a peach and a nectarine. It is my least favorite of the group, but someone else might really like it because it's very sweet. The other two fruits are a little more tart. I have just not had such good fruit in a long time. But as Megan and I were talking, we don't know what it is about Sprouts grocery store, but they are really good at picking everything. And whoever is their buyer for their vegetable and fruit area, which is a big, huge part of their store, everything comes in at the perfect peak of ripeness. If you buy a blueberry there, it's the best blueberry you ever ate. They outdo Whole Foods. Don't ask me. I don't know how they do it, but go them. Everything in there is delicious. Megan got some purple corn that instead of being a popcorn, like so much of that is, or a green corn, this was a sweet corn. She goes, you've got to go back today and get some. And I thought, I think I will.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Now, remember last year I grew wild violet sweet corn, which just has little pieces of purple in it. Anyway, that sounds really good. So that was our dirt, the very cherry plum, which turns out to be Dee's obsession with all kinds of hybrid fruit.
I mean, it was just really fun to do. And, if you can get people to eat fruit, I think you're doing good. Because the truth of the matter is, a lot of stuff that is shipped in the United States is not shipped at peak, and it's just not very good. That's why we grow fruit trees.
Yeah, they try all kinds of weird techniques to keep it in storage and yeah,
It's just
better
not
to
as
eat in
good.
season.
Yeah, eat in season, enjoy. And by the way, their regular cherries are great too. And the regular peaches, they have apricots too this year. So do the next quote and we'll go on to our rabbit holes.
I know that I will never understand everything, but that doesn't stop me from trying. I'm content to live in the mystery, to be surrounded by the unknown. I am content to be a seeker, a pilgrim, a traveler on the road to nowhere. And that is Henry Miller, Black Spring Book. That must be the name of his book.
Yeah, Henry
Anyway, rabbit
Miller,
holes.
a great writer. Okay, so the dirt was my rabbit hole this week. I went and looked up all that, and of course, a lot of it's shrouded in mystery. Because they don't want to let anybody know how they make berry cherry plums. Why would they? They're making a lot of money off of them, and they spent a lot of
Exactly.
time. But really enjoyed researching that. It's been really fun.
So my rabbit hole was I finished up the latest Lost Lady of Garden Writing. And it was Anne Ophelia Dowden. And she did, as we talked about last week, caused me to buy like 7 new books,
7 new books.
which is used. They were used, good used copies, not very expensive. But I did notice when I thought, well, there's just one more that I want.
Yeah.
But I went to look and I was like, wow, that's really expensive. And I thought, I wonder if like me buying a bunch of her titles caused the internet to tell the booksellers, hey, getting a run on the Anne Ophelia Dowden books. They might want to raise those prices. Though I can't imagine that I had that kind of influence. So, and then I gave Siri, my phone, she has a new name.
Oh, what's her name now?
Wimp. It's short for woman in my phone. And she can be, it all started because one day she told me, I said, Siri, what's the weather? She said rain. And I looked out after I got all dressed to go run errands and it wasn't raining. And so I had to completely redress to go out to the garden. I thought, Siri, you lazy, you didn't want me to go out there. And then sometimes the phone says, hey, Carol, why don't you doom scroll a little longer before doing your cleaning up or whatever? Well, there might be something new on Instagram. I'm in your pocket. I want you to pull me out so that you can look. And so anyway, I call her Wimp now because she is lazy and doesn't want to do stuff.
So my
That's
Siri, that's funny. My Siri is a man. I changed it to a man's English voice, and people are always like stunned because my Siri is a guy. And they asked me why, and I said, because when I was working in the law offices, a lot of men told me what to do all the time, and now I get to tell Siri what to do, and it makes me happy. Siri is my secretary because I started out as a secretary. I can tell you back in the days when it was still get me coffee, stuff like that. So it's my little feminist act, I guess. As much as I'm
I
not much of
guess.
a feminist, but it's enjoyable to have Siri be a guy. Makes me laugh.
And my fine is to say Wimp. And I wonder if you can change your phone to say, instead of Siri, I'm going to say Wimp and I want you to do
Oh,
stuff.
you can totally do that. Yes, you can. So you can say, "Hey, wimp." Hey, wimp.
That yeah, I might do that. That'll
You
be my
should.
rabbit hole to
It's
figure
not
out how
really
to do that.
hard. It's very easy. It's very easy. So,
Anyway,
garden commissions, shifting gears.
shifting gears. So I'm going to mow, weed, harvest.
Yep.
I have 2 big bags of green beans in my refrigerator that I need to clean up, and I'm going to freeze a bunch of them for wintertime. Like I said, I have to tend to my seedlings, my biennials and perennials, and get some of those outside. And other than that, I think it's going to be just like a normal let's garden week. How about you?
Let's see. I'm going to cut back the rest of the lavender and sow a few more teddy bear sunflower seeds. Some of them didn't come up, so I'm going to try. I may also do a few of them indoors and put them outside doing those burpee deals. Because if I put them right next to my plants that I have to water anyway, I'll water them hopefully. And then let's see. I'm going to pull up more of my tomato plants that are finished. It was, my tomatoes were kind of sad this year. We got too much rain too early, spider mites. And I was just going to say, for all of our listeners, you win some, we lose some. I got quite a few tomatoes right off, and then it just kind of went downhill. I have one tomato plant left that I planted later, and it's doing okay. But here's the truth: I have, MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome, along with alpha-gal, and I'm really not supposed to eat a lot of tomatoes, if at all. So that's okay. You know what I can eat a lot of? Green beans. And the green beans have been fabulous this year. So Bill and I eat a lot of summer squash and a lot of green beans. And out of the garden, there's nothing better, right?
Yeah.
And let's see, I'll also keep weeding and working in the garden. I do this in the mornings when it's not hot. It's been fabulous, glorious the last few days. So there you go.
Yeah. And you've reminded me that I have that big lavender back in the vegetable garden and I need to trim all that back too. It's time to trim that, give it a good haircut.
Yeah. Yeah. And next year I'm going to have to rethink my garden a little bit about, will I plant as many tomatoes and eggplant and peppers that are all part of that nightshade family? Probably not.
Yeah. And my tomatoes are doing pretty well. I've had some blossom in rot, which that's expected early. The earlier
Early in the
tomatoes tend to
season.
get that.
Yeah.
But I am trying to be careful about picking them before they get too ripe because there's some critter and I have to go clean up and it's like they pick it, they take a bite and they throw it on my brand new fabric covered paths. I'm like, way to make a mess.
Have you not covered up your fabric yet?
With what?
Mulch. I thought you were going to cover it up with mulch.
No, I just leave the fabric bare.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I always have.
Huh. I didn't know
I
that.
don't know. If I was going to do anything, I would put rock back there. But, say it with me, Dee. That's a lot of work.
That is a lot of work, but it sure is pretty. That's all I'm going to say about that. Wrap this up, Carol.
I'm going to wrap this. Thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
And if you subscribe to our free Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelist at Substack.com, you'll get a link to listen to the podcast a whole day early.
If you want to help support us, use our affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we're in a small commission and it costs you nothing.
Or you're welcome to set up a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout or make a one-time donation through PayPal. We really appreciate it.
Thank you to everyone who has done so. It helps us pay for podcast hosting.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.